I am Fred, and this is my Chapter 7 Room at the Table Book Club discussion. Chapter 7 is titled Building Relationships for Equity. It attempts to address how unconscious biases in hiring and leadership decisions can perpetuate inequalities, especially for minority groups. Renee Kennedy's argument that people seek out others like themselves suggests that the lack of diversity in leadership isn't necessarily the result of overt discrimination, but rather unconscious preferences that lead to a lack of inclusion for those from different backgrounds. This argument, while potentially valid in some contexts, doesn't fully account for the considerable progress modern America has made towards fostering a diverse and inclusive society. The quote on page 106, "We say that we value diversity, but we shun difference," is a simplistic take on a complex issue. It frames American society as resistant to true diversity, implying that despite claims of valuing inclusivity, people are hesitant to embrace those who are different from themselves. However, this viewpoint overlooks the fact that many organizations today have made significant strides in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in hiring practices. And while there may still be more work to do, the broad brushstrokes used here seem to ignore the progress that has been made. Additionally, the notion that minorities don't get hired because people seek out others like themselves also feels somewhat reductive. While it might partially explain the underrepresentation of minorities in certain leadership roles, it disregards the broader context of intentional efforts to create pathways for diverse candidates. In many ways, this chapter misses the opportunity to engage with how today's leadership is actively working to dismantle systemic barriers. Instead, it focuses on an outdated view of equity challenges, which undermines the substantial progress seen in hiring practices and training programs across many industries. The idea that we are still shunning difference feels like a sweeping generalization of society that has increasingly embraced diversity in ways not seen before. My colleagues in book club seem to have an altruistic and idealistic view of modern diversity, which tends to emphasize the need for continued efforts in addressing inequities. And while it's important to acknowledge the challenges that still exist, it's equally important to recognize how much has changed. There is no doubt that leadership in health equity must continue addressing gaps in representation, but it also needs to consider how far we've come in creating more inclusive environments. Overemphasizing the failures while underappreciating the achievements risks distorting the narrative and overlooking the real progress that has been made. Room at the Table challenges leaders to examine their biases and build relationships across differences, but its emphasis on what hasn't been achieved rather than celebrating the genuine achievements feels one-sided. Leaders today are not only rethinking power dynamics, but also actively transforming their organizations to be more inclusive, proving that modern diversity is more than just a theory, it's being put into practice.